Okay, so Genesis 23, it's about Abraham sacrificing Isaac. So, sorry, 22. So the reason I want to say this is because when I I came to God in September 2023, but after I came to God, I still needed to know if it was real, because I spent a lot of time before that just enjoying the new atheism, and you know, it was very hard to get rid of some of these ideas. Like, I just believe in God now because I need it, or stuff like this. So I had a few experiences which were basically scientific in the way that they couldn't be coincidental unless I was willing to admit that stupidly high probabilities just kept occurring. And I'll tell you one of them. I can't remember in detail most of them because I was very messy back then. But the most recent one, which happened to my friend, when I was talking to my friend about this, I'll tell you at the end. But it's a bit similar to what happens in Genesis 22. But Genesis 22 seems like a much bigger one. So Genesis 22 is foreshadowing the coming of Jesus. They say Genesis... So I will tell the story first. So God calls to Abraham. Abraham says, "Here I am." God says, "Take your son, your firstborn son, who you love, and go to the mountain of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering." And first thing is, Isaac isn't Abraham's firstborn son, but because Ishmael is. But Ishmael was born to Hagar. Isaac is Abraham's firstborn son of the covenant that God made with Abraham and Sarah. So next morning, Abraham saddled his ass, took his two servants, his son. He split the wood for the burnt offering and set out for the place which God had told him. On the third day, Abraham looked up and saw the place from afar. Then Abraham said to his servants, "You stay here with the ass. The boy and I will go up. We will worship and we will return to you." So he's just been told to sacrifice Isaac. If he's been told to sacrifice Isaac, why is he saying, "We will return"? Right? Because Isaac's going to be dead. So why is he saying that? Again, it's probably because God made a covenant with Abraham. And how can the covenant be fulfilled? Because Isaac hasn't had children yet. Anyway, Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and put it on his son Isaac. So Isaac is now carrying the wood for his own sacrifice. He took the firestone and the knife, and the two walked off together. So they're walking up this hill, Isaac, the firstborn son, with the wood on his back. Then Isaac said to his father, "Father," and he answered, "Yes, my son." And he said, "Here are the firestone and the wood, but where is the sheep or the lamb for the burnt offering?" And Abraham said, "God will provide the sheep or the lamb for his burnt offering." And in Hebrew it says, he will provide the sheep for himself for the offering. And the two of them walked on together. They arrived at the place which God had told him. Abraham built an altar, he laid out the wood, he bound his son Isaac, and he laid him on the altar on top of the wood. So now Isaac, the firstborn son, who for 3 days has travelled under this curse of death, is now laid upon the wood on the altar for a burnt offering sacrifice. Now one of the different sacrifices had different purposes: wave offerings, thanks offerings, sin offerings, all these things. One of the reasons a burnt offering was used was as a sin sacrifice. So he's now laid on the wood on the altar for a burnt offering. He picked up the knife to kill his son because he was going to do it for God. Then the angel of the Lord called to him, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he said. "Do not raise your hand against the boy or do anything for him, for I know now that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your favoured son, from me." When Abraham looked upon... So, again, that's something that I've learned a bit about faith. if it's like speaking and doing. If you have faith, you can believe something, but if you don't speak it and you don't do it, it's not, you're not actualizing that faith. So part of actualizing that faith is speaking and doing it. So Abraham was ready to do it. And because he was ready to give his firstborn son for God, the angel of the Lord stops him. And then what happens next? Abraham looked up and his eye fell upon a ram. Now what's a ram? It's not a sheep, it's not a lamb, but it's a male, full-grown male sheep. A bit like Jesus is a full-grown male, but he is a lamb. And what happened is his head is caught in the thicket by its thorns. So the head of this ram is caught by in a thorn bush, just like Jesus with the crown of thorns. So Abraham went, took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering. And Abraham named the site Adonai Yireh, which means on the mount of the Lord he shall be seen, or it shall be seen. What shall be seen? We don't know. But what we do know is that a sheep needed, or a lamb needed to be provided for that sacrifice. And what was provided was a ram. Now, how does this come into Jesus? Well, Jesus was put under the curse of death for 3 days. He carried his own wood as a sin sacrifice. He was tied on top of that wood or bound on top of that wood, offered up as a sin sacrifice, not a burnt offering, but we know from Psalms, my heart has melted and turned to wax, that sort of stuff. He wore a crown of thorns. He was a full-grown male, and he was the Lamb of God. Now, this is the bit where the prophecy comes in. If Exodus is written when it says it's written, which is basically, if Genesis is written by Moses, as is traditionally said, it would be written during the Exodus, which is 1400 BC. So what is Moriah? What is Mount Moriah? Well, Moriah is a place that came to be Jerusalem. And when did Jerusalem first come about? Well, Jerusalem first came about at 1000 BC. So this prophecy was written 400 years before Jerusalem was even a place. And where was Jesus sacrificed? In Jerusalem, or just outside Jerusalem. So the Lamb of God, who was under the curse of death for 3 days, who carried his own wood, who was God's only son, even though we're all sons of God, was offered up as a sin offering to show a father's love, basically, one for God, but God for his creation this time round. And it's upon the place that Abraham did this 1,400 years or even more before. Now, there's lots of scholars who will say, well, the Septuagint, we can date it back as far as 200 or 300 BCE, and that's it. Well, yeah, that was the Greek written one. But even the Hebrew one, we only have fragments going back about 800 to 800 BC. And Jerusalem was a place even 200 years before that, so it could be, they wrote it after this and that. Yeah, they could have written it after, but it didn't just pop out of nothing. The older the manuscripts, the harder they are to keep. For example, the first, decent-sized bit of manuscript we have of Homer's Odyssey came 800 years after it was actually written. So there's 800 years of just stuff being copied and destroyed, copied and destroyed, copied and destroyed, until we get the bit that we have today. Either way, it foreshadows Jesus, and you could say, well, Jesus just saw this and he wanted to fit that pattern, but he'd have had to have fulfilled many other prophecies, such as where he was born, what lineage, before the destruction of the second temple, how he died, they put a crown of thorns on his head. All these things that he couldn't control, he'd have had to just basically found himself in that position and then been willing to go through with all of it. So even then, some people will say, yes, but. And this is where I want to share the story of how God talks to me sometimes in this way to affirm that he's real, or to my friends. And this is the most recent one. So I went down to my friend's a couple of months ago, and his wife, we get on really well, doesn't believe in God. And we went out to like take the kids to a little place, all three of us, and we got into a discussion about it. And I started saying about like, you can know if God's real because if you ask and if you're really willing to know and then you look, then he'll talk to you in some ways. And she was saying how, and I described sort of prophecy like this, and she goes, that's like the yellow car phenomena. That's like, you never see yellow cars, but if you playing the yellow car game, now there's yellow cars everywhere. Now you see them all the time. That's all that is. It's just your mind attaching to it. And I said, I know that's a thing, but God seems to be able to stick stuff in that can't be to do with that. And you basically either have to say, it's just mad coincidence, or you can choose to say, it looks like there's something in it, maybe I'll ask again. But at some point you've got to decide it's not mad coincidence. And some of these things you can't control. It's like, how could Moses or whoever wrote Genesis know that Jesus would be sacrificed with a crown of thorns upon wood in a place called Moriah, which then later became Jerusalem, as the only son, under the curse of death for 3 days, who was a full-grown male but was also the Lamb of God, the lamb that wasn't provided for the sacrifice for Abraham, etc., etc., etc. How could, Moses, there's no way that Moses could know that, and God seems to do that. He seems to, because he's eternal outside of time, he can come in front of time in just ways I can't really explain. I couldn't really explain it very well. And she goes, well, you know what, it's all nice, but I believe in different stuff. I believe in stuff like maths. Like maths you can prove. Maths, you can describe everything, you can see it in action. And I go, brilliant, because that's exactly what I'm talking about. Because maths is based on axioms, and maths cannot work without axioms. You can't prove a single thing in maths without axioms. And what are axioms? Statements we take to be true. We have faith these statements are true, but there is no way of proving they are true. We just take them to be true, and from that we build pictures of reality that turn out to be functional and, for all intents and purposes, true. And then we can prove things, that these things are actually provably true, but only because they're based on axioms, and the axioms can't be proven to be true. And she's saying, oh yeah, well, you know what, whatever. Then we went for lunch, and we were sitting in a cafe, and she goes, look, and she pointed behind, and on a building behind, massive in big letters all across the top windows, there was Jesus. And she's like, you see, this is what I mean. It's like the yellow car phenomena. Now that your brain's thinking about it, you're looking for it, and I'm like, yeah, I know what you mean. And that might be a sign, but it's not really, that's not what I'm saying, and it's up to God whether he talks to you or not. We got home. As soon as we got home, we were in the house like 15 minutes. I'm sitting in the living room. She comes in. She's opened, she goes, look at this. This is so weird. She's opened a package that has just arrived from her mum, who lives in Bulgaria, who sends us stuff like randomly, like I don't know how much, but rarely, very rarely sends us stuff. And this package has just arrived, and she's just opened it, and it's a book with a title in Bulgarian, and it says God and Mathematics, right? So there is no way that in the half hour it took us to get home after that conversation, her mum could have got a book from Bulgaria to here. So that was in the works long before the conversation I had with her took place. Now you can say, oh, well, it's just coincidence. It's near Christmas. Maybe it was a Christmas thing. Her mum's a Christian. Maybe she'll send her Christian things. All these things. But when you put them all together, to have that exact conversation, have that exact Christian book sent, have it to happen in that exact order, you know, that's where it comes to faith. Are you just going to dismiss it as a complete coincidence, or are you going to say there might be something here but I need a little bit more? Do you know what I mean? And that's up to you, but there will come a point where you can just do a Sartre till the world ends. Because I think therefore I am, I can't know anything else. I think therefore am I really here? Are you really here? Who knows? I think therefore you can do that. No one can stop you doing that. But if you're going to do that in terms of religion and you think you're a good person and you're not a hypocrite, then you've got to do it with everything. And then you can see how that works out for you. So this is why seeing this prophecy in Genesis, and this is after I had some of my experiences, which I can't fully remember now because I was in a bit of a bad place, but I had my experiences. It's one of the ways that God has talked to me and then talked to my friend, and I think can talk to you, and how he foreshadows things and goes in front and knows everything that's going to happen, even though it's not predetermined. So that's it. Thank you.